If I could turn back time, I would choose to die 1,000 deaths just to keep you alive." The words echoed in Henry's mind, twisting like a cruel prophecy as he stared at the empty crib in the corner of the darkened nursery. It was supposed to be a place of hope, a place where a new life blossomed, where laughter filled the air and love wrapped around every corner. Instead, it was a tomb of silence. The night was suffocating. Outside, the wind howled through cracked windows like a restless ghost, and the shadows crept long and cold across the wooden floorboards. Henry's breath came in ragged gasps as he sank to his knees, hands trembling, reaching toward the hollow emptiness where his daughter should have been. A single photograph lay face down on the floor, half buried beneath a forgotten blanket. The last glimpse of Lily, her smile frozen in time, bright and alive. But she wasn't here anymore. His world shattered in that moment. Time stopped. The air thickened until every breath was a battle against the crushing weight of grief. Then, as darkness swallowed him whole, something deep inside Henry stirred. Not a spark of hope, but a desperate, desperate hunger for another chance. Days blurred into nights, and nights bled into endless pain. Henry and Emily went through the motions, their faces masks of hollow resignation, their hearts broken beyond repair. Yet amid the wreckage of their lives, Henry began to dream, vivid, impossible dreams of another existence. A small voice called to him through the void. "Come back. You are not finished." He woke one morning gasping, his body no longer his own. The sterile hospital walls replaced by soft pastel colors, and the scent of fresh linen. He opened his eyes. The world was different. He was different. He was a baby again. In the crib. In the same nursery. But this was no ordinary birth. Inside Henry's infant eyes burned the memories of a man who had loved, lost, and broken beyond repair. The memories of a father who had failed to protect the one he loved most. He was reborn, not just as a child, but as the younger sibling of the daughter he lost. And with that rebirth came a sacred mission: to heal a family drowning in grief, to mend wounds carved deep by tragedy, and to fight against the silence that threatened to consume them all. Henry's new life began with a burden heavier than any child should carry, the weight of knowing what was lost, and the desperate hope to make it right. His parents were broken, his family fractured, but somewhere beneath the sorrow, a second chance waited, fragile, delicate, and full of possibility, and Henry would stop at nothing to seize it. The morning sun poured hesitantly through the pale curtains, casting long, lazy stripes across the worn wooden floor. The nursery smelled faintly of lavender and old sorrow, a scent Henry had never before noticed, but now it clung to the air like a ghost. Cradled in the arms of a woman whose hands trembled with a mixture of love and pain, Henry lay wrapped in a blanket, his tiny chest rising and falling with quiet breaths. But inside his infant mind, the storm of memories raged fiercely. He remembered the laughter of his sister Lily, the sound of her footsteps echoing down these very halls. The smile that once lit this house like a summer day, now extinguished. His parents, Emily and the man he once was, moved through the home like ghosts, shadows trailing their every step. Their eyes carried a dullness, a weariness born not just of grief, but of a love turned fragile and raw. Emily, his mother, sat silently by the kitchen table, her fingers loosely wrapped around a chipped coffee cup. Her eyes stared blankly ahead, but Henry felt the tremble in her hands, the unspoken words held hostage by a broken heart. His father paced nearby, jaw clenched, struggling to hold back the torrent of regret that threatened to break him apart. Henry knew this house intimately. It was the place where joy had once lived, where family dinners were filled with chatter and warmth. But now, it was a hollow shell, haunted by memories and silence. Days passed, and Henry grew, physically a newborn, but in his soul, a guardian armed with knowledge no child should bear. Every glance from his parents spoke volumes. Emily's eyes softened when she looked at him, a fragile flicker of hope buried beneath her grief. Henry's father, often distant, seemed to wrestle silently with the ghosts of his own failures. He watched them, studied them, learning the rhythms of pain and longing that bound them. When Emily sang lullabies, her voice cracked with sorrow, but in those moments, Henry sensed a fragile connection, a tether that he vowed to strengthen. At night, the house was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional muffled sob or the creak of floorboards as his father wandered alone, lost in memories. Henry longed to reach out, to bridge the chasm that tragedy had torn open. One evening, the air heavy with rain, Henry's mother sat by the fireplace, clutching a faded photograph. It was the same picture Henry had seen the night he was reborn, Lily's smiling face, frozen in a moment of pure joy. Her voice barely a whisper, Emily spoke to the empty room. Words meant for no one but the shadows. "If only you could have stayed. If only I could have done more." Henry wished with every fiber of his being to tell her, "I am here now. I am your second chance." But he was trapped in the fragile form of a child, unable to voice what his heart screamed. His father entered quietly, standing behind Emily, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. For a fleeting moment, their grief touched like two broken pieces trying desperately to fit back together. But the silence soon returned, louder than any words. In the small moments, Henry began to sense something stirring beneath the sorrow, a faint pulse of hope, fragile but undeniable. Emily began to smile again, hesitant but real, when Henry reached for her finger with his tiny hand. His father's steps grew steadier, his gaze softer. And in the quiet, Henry felt the first stirrings of his purpose, to heal, to rebuild, and to breathe life back into a family shattered by tragedy. The journey would be long. The wounds were deep. But Henry was no longer just a child. He was the embodiment of love's second chance. And he would fight with everything he had to bring his family back from the edge of despair. The days grew longer, but the house remained cloaked in a heavy stillness, as if time itself was afraid to move forward. Henry, though small and fragile, carried the weight of his memories like armor. Memories that whispered secrets no infant should know. At first, the family barely noticed the boy's unusual attentiveness. His bright eyes seemed to watch too deeply, his quietness too profound. But slowly, subtle changes began to ripple beneath the surface, like the first tremors before an earthquake. Henry watched everything. Every glance exchanged between Emily and his father. Every sigh that escaped lips heavy with sorrow. Every fragile smile that tried to break through the clouds. He learned the unspoken language of grief, the way his mother's hands would tremble when she thought no one was watching, the hollow gaze his father wore when he stared out the window for hours, the way silence itself could speak louder than any word. One afternoon, Henry sat nestled in his mother's lap while she leafed through an old photo album. The pages crackled with memories, and each photograph seemed to carve fresh wounds in their hearts. "There she is," Emily whispered, her voice trembling as her fingers traced Lily's smiling face. "Our little angel." Henry's tiny hand reached out, resting gently on the worn page as if to promise, "I'm here now. I'll protect you." It was a rainy afternoon when Henry spoke his first word. "Mom." The single syllable hung in the air like a fragile thread, pulling at Emily's heart with a force she hadn't felt in months. She froze, tears welling up as she looked down at the child she held. Her son, her lost daughter's brother, the impossible second chance. "Did you just say—" "Mom," Henry repeated, voice barely above a whisper but filled with profound warmth. That word shattered the walls they had all built around their pain. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily smiled through tears, clutching Henry closer. His father appeared in the doorway, stunned by the sound of a word that felt like hope itself. Language was just the beginning. Henry began to heal not only by speaking but by acting, small gestures of love that mended invisible cracks. He reached for Emily's hand during her moments of sadness. He smiled at his father when the man looked lost. He laughed when the house seemed too heavy with silence. Each small act was a balm on the wounds that had seemed too deep to ever heal. But the memories remained a heavy cloak. Late at night, when the world was quiet, Henry's infant mind replayed the tragedy over and over. The accident, the hospital, the loss. The images were seared into his soul, a constant reminder of what was broken. He wondered if this rebirth was a blessing or a curse. Was he meant to live with the pain of knowing what once was? Or was he the hope that could rewrite their future? The answer lay somewhere between the shadows and the light. One evening, as rain tapped softly on the window pane, the family gathered in the living room, a rare moment of togetherness. Emily rocked Henry gently, her eyes filled with a cautious light. His father finally spoke, voice rough but sincere. Maybe we can find a way back, together." Henry's heart soared, a small flame kindling inside him. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with pain and the ghosts of their past. But for the first time, they dared to believe in second chances. The days that followed were filled with fragile attempts at normalcy, like glass trying to hold water without breaking. Henry watched closely as his parents struggled to balance their grief with the faint flickers of hope that he embodied. The house, once a mausoleum of sorrow, began to echo with tentative laughter and quiet conversations. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Emily prepared a meal. The kitchen smelled of roasted chicken and herbs, a scent that once meant comfort, now tinged with hesitation. Henry sat in his high chair at the table, his bright eyes scanning the faces of his mother and father. There was a nervousness in the air, an unspoken question hanging between them. Could they really try again? His father cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "It's good to be here," he said quietly, glancing at Emily. She nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "It is." Henry reached out a chubby hand, touching his mother's. The contact was simple, but it spoke volumes, a silent promise that he was there to heal the family they had almost lost. But beneath these tentative steps toward healing lurked deep fears. Henry felt the weight of the past pressing down on his tiny shoulders. Memories of Lily's laughter haunted the hallways. Her absence was a palpable ache. Emily often found herself gazing at his crib long after he had fallen asleep, her thoughts drifting to what could have been. Henry, though still a child, sensed the pain behind her eyes, the mother's guilt, the father's regret. Sometimes, in the quiet darkness, he wished he could carry that burden for them, to absorb the sorrow so they might breathe easier. One crisp autumn afternoon, Henry took his first unsteady steps. His parents watched with breathless anticipation. When he finally wobbled forward, arms outstretched, a bright smile blossomed on his face. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Our little miracle," she whispered. His father laughed softly, a sound so rare and precious it echoed through the house like music. In that moment, Henry wasn't just a child. He was the bridge between past and future, the living proof that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. But healing wasn't without its battles. One evening, Emily found herself drawn to the attic, a place filled with boxes of memories and unopened letters. Among the dust and shadows, she uncovered Lily's favorite doll, worn and faded. Holding it tightly, she allowed herself to cry, grief breaking through years of silence. Henry sat beside her, tiny hand resting on hers. Though he couldn't speak the words, his presence was a balm. That night, as the house settled into silence, the cracks in their hearts slowly began to mend, one fragile piece at a time. The journey was far from over. Shadows of the past lingered, but hope was no longer a stranger in their home. Henry's rebirth was not just a miracle, it was a mission. To heal, to forgive, and to love beyond tragedy. And as the first leaves of fall drifted outside the window, the family dared to dream of a future where laughter once again filled their home. The crisp autumn air seeped through the cracks in the old windows, carrying with it the scent of fading leaves and distant rain. The house, once heavy with sorrow, was beginning to hum softly with the stirrings of life. Yet beneath that gentle pulse, hidden beneath layers of hope and fragile smiles, lay secrets that threatened to unravel the fragile peace Henry's rebirth had begun to weave. Henry's father, Thomas, had always been a man of few words. Since Lily's death, his silence had deepened, filled with things left unsaid, shadows of guilt that hung like a dark cloud. Lately, Henry noticed the way Thomas would disappear into the study late at night, the door closing softly behind him. One evening, Henry, held by Emily, caught a glimpse of a letter on the desk. The paper was yellowed and creased, the ink slightly faded. Curiosity sparked deep within Henry's infant heart, as if he understood the importance of the words written there. Emily's whispered conversation with Thomas one night revealed little, but the tension in their voices told another story, one of blame, regret, and unresolved pain. It was during a rare quiet afternoon that Henry, now toddling with newfound confidence, found himself drawn to the attic, the place where forgotten memories lay buried beneath dust and cobwebs. There, hidden in a box marked Lily, lay journals, photographs, and letters. Remnants of a life that once was. Emily caught him just as he reached for an old photograph of Lily, her eyes wide with unspoken grief. "We don't talk about it much," she said softly, brushing a tear from Henry's cheek. "But there are things you need to know, little one." Through fragmented stories and halting tears, Henry learned of the accident, a moment's lapse, a slippery road, a life lost too soon. But beneath the surface, a secret began to emerge. The accident wasn't entirely chance. There were hidden failures, moments of regret that Thomas bore alone. Henry's reborn soul wrestled with the weight of this truth. Could love survive the cracks caused by blame? Could a family broken by grief find healing in the shadow of secrets? Emily, fragile yet determined, spoke of forgiveness, not just of others, but of themselves. "We carry the past in our hearts," she said one evening, "but we must choose whether it will destroy us or make us stronger." Henry reached for her hand, his small fingers weaving a silent promise of hope and renewal. One stormy night, the house trembled beneath the roar of thunder, mirroring the turmoil inside. Thomas finally broke his silence, confessing the guilt he had hidden for so long. Tears streamed down his face as he laid bare his failures, his fears, and his love for the family he thought he had lost forever. Emily listened, her own tears mingling with his, and in that moment, the barriers between them began to crumble. Henry, lying between them, felt the first true sense of unity, a fragile but powerful bond forged in honesty and shared pain. The road ahead was uncertain, marked by challenges and the scars of yesterday. But for Henry and his family, the night's revelations marked the beginning of real healing, no longer just a dream or a distant hope, but a living, breathing reality. In his tiny heart, Henry knew, sometimes, the heaviest burdens must be carried together. And only then can love truly conquer tragedy. The fragile light of dawn seeped softly through the curtains, casting a gentle glow over the quiet house. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving behind a washed clean world and a tentative promise of renewal. Inside, the air felt lighter, like the first breath after a long-held silence. Henry stirred in his crib, tiny fists curling and uncurling as his eyes fluttered open. Though still small in body, his soul was old, bearing memories and hopes far beyond his years. Today felt different. The house felt different. Emily sat nearby, nursing a cup of tea, her eyes tracing Henry's delicate features with a newfound tenderness. Thomas stood by the window, gazing out at the garden, once neglected, now showing signs of spring's gentle touch. For the first time since tragedy had torn them apart, there was a sense of quiet togetherness, a fragile but real connection threading through the family. Henry's tiny hand reached out for his mother's, and when she took it, the warmth passed between them like a silent vow. "We will heal," Emily whispered, more to herself than anyone else. It was decided that the family would take their first trip outside the house together. A small walk to the nearby park, nothing grand, but enough to step beyond the walls that had confined them in grief. The crisp air filled their lungs as they stepped out, the scent of earth and blooming flowers wrapping around them like a soft embrace. Henry's laughter, bright and clear, rang out as he took unsteady steps on the grass. His parents watched, smiles breaking through the shadows of their past. The world outside was waiting, full of new beginnings and untold stories. At the park, neighbors greeted them warmly. Aunts and uncles of the neighborhood, some aware of the family's loss, others meeting Henry for the first time. An elderly woman named Mrs. Daniels approached, her eyes soft with understanding. "It's a blessing to see life bloom again in this house," she said kindly. "Take your time. Healing is a journey." Her words settled gently in Thomas and Emily's hearts. A reminder that grief was not a battle to be won quickly but a path to walk patiently. Yet even amid the laughter and sunlight, shadows lurked. Henry noticed how his parents sometimes exchanged glances heavy with unspoken worry, how Emily's smile sometimes faltered when memories struck unbidden. At night, dreams haunted Henry, a mixture of past and present, memories of Lily mingling with his new life. Sometimes he awoke crying, the weight of knowing too much pressing on his young heart, but with every dawn, he found strength in his family's fragile hope. One evening, as Henry lay nestled between his parents, he reached out, fingers entwining with theirs. Though words were few, a silent promise passed between them all. Henry was their second chance. Not just a child reborn, but a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could be softened by love. Together, they would face the future, no matter how uncertain. The house was quieter than ever that evening, the kind of silence that felt heavy, filled with things left unsaid. Henry lay in his crib, eyes wide open, sensing the weight pressing down on the room like an invisible fog. Emily sat by the window, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of a lamp. Her fingers trembled as she clutched a letter, one she had been avoiding for months. The letter from the insurance company, the one that threatened to pull their lives apart once again. Loss was only the beginning. The world outside demanded answers, payments, and decisions. Cold and unforgiving. Bills piled up, legal forms multiplied, and the house, their sanctuary, teetered on the brink of foreclosure. Thomas paced the floor, jaw clenched, shoulders hunched under the weight of responsibilities he had never anticipated. The financial strain gnawed at the fragile threads holding the family together. Emily's tears were quiet but constant, the stress seeping into every corner of her being. Henry, though a child, felt the tremors of fear and uncertainty. He reached out, his tiny hand resting on Emily's as if to say, "I am here. We will survive." Just when hope seemed thin, a knock came at the door. It was Sarah, Emily's sister, warm, determined, and carrying with her a fresh breeze of possibility. Sarah had always been the steady presence in Emily's life, the one who had quietly watched the family struggle from afar. "I'm here," she said softly. "Let me help." Her arrival sparked a shift, a reminder that healing was not meant to be walked alone. Together, the family began to piece together solutions. Sarah helped organize paperwork, reached out to community support, and encouraged Emily and Thomas to attend a local support group for grieving parents. At the group, they found others with stories like theirs, broken but hopeful, wounded but healing. Henry's parents started to open their hearts again, sharing their pain and fears in a circle of understanding. Through the haze of worry and loss, small moments of joy began to flicker. Henry's first tentative words beyond Mom and Dad. Lily whispered one afternoon as he reached for a framed photo. Emily caught the word, breath-catching. "Yes, sweetheart. She's always with us." It was a step forward, a bridge spanning past and present, love and loss. As days turned to weeks, the family's fragile bond grew stronger. Though the future remained uncertain, they faced it hand in hand. Henry's rebirth had given them a second chance, not only to heal, but to live. And in the quiet moments, beneath the weight of grief and hope, they found something precious, resilience. The soft glow of the evening lamp cast long shadows across the living room walls. The house, still bearing the marks of sorrow, hummed with an uneasy tension. Henry, now toddling with growing curiosity, played quietly on the floor, unaware of the storm brewing between his parents. Emily sat on the sofa, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Thomas stood by the window, his back rigid, jaw tight as he stared into the darkening sky. Words hung heavy in the air, words that could either shatter the fragile peace or begin a long-needed healing. It had been weeks since the family support group, yet the distance between Emily and Thomas had grown. The grief that once united them was now pulling them apart, revealing cracks beneath the surface. Emily felt the weight of loneliness pressing down. Thomas, consumed by guilt and frustration, retreated into himself. Neither knew how to bridge the growing gap. Henry sensed the coldness, but couldn't understand its source. His small hands reached for his mother's, seeking comfort, but even her touch trembled with uncertainty. That night, the silence broke like a dam. Emily's voice, usually soft, was sharp with pain. "Thomas, I need you. Not just here, but truly here." Thomas turned, eyes weary but fierce. "I'm trying, Emily. But sometimes, I don't know if I'm enough." Tears spilled freely as the walls they'd built began to crumble. The raw honesty was painful but necessary, the first step toward rebuilding trust. Between them, Henry sat watching, a tiny witness to the fragile dance of love and loss. Though he couldn't speak the words, his presence was a reminder of hope, the living proof that even broken families could find a way back. Emily scooped him into her arms, holding him close as Thomas reached out, hesitantly at first, then with growing determination. In that moment, a fragile thread was woven, a promise to try again, to forgive, and to heal. The family knew the journey would be long and difficult. There would be setbacks, tears, and moments of doubt. But they also knew they were no longer alone. Together, they would face the pain, nurture the love, and build a new future. One step, one word, one embrace at a time. The golden light of late afternoon spilled through the windows, warming the worn wooden floors and casting long shadows across the room. Henry toddled toward the fireplace, clutching a small wooden toy, his eyes bright and curious. Emily sat nearby, quietly watching, her fingers nervously twisting a silver locket. Lilies. The familiar weight grounded her in a swirl of conflicting emotions: love, guilt, hope, and fear. The memories were a constant echo, moments replayed endlessly in Emily's mind. She remembered the day of the accident with vivid clarity, the screech of tires, the shattering glass, Lily's frightened eyes. The blame she carried wasn't just for the accident itself, but for the walls it had built between her and Thomas. For years, forgiveness seemed impossible, a distant shore beyond reach. One evening, after Henry was asleep, Emily found herself in the kitchen with Thomas. The room was thick with unsaid words. "I've been holding on to my anger," Emily confessed softly. "Not just at you, but at myself." Thomas reached out, his hand covering hers. "I've carried the same weight." We were both lost in grief. Their eyes met, tired, vulnerable, but searching. Forgiveness, they realized, wasn't about forgetting or excusing pain. It was about releasing the poison of blame to make room for love. Slowly, they began to share their burdens, their regrets, and their hopes. Each conversation chipped away at the walls that had separated them. Henry's laughter, innocent and pure, became the soundtrack of their healing, a reminder that life could bloom again. On a quiet Sunday morning, the family gathered in the garden, a place once neglected but now blooming with new life. Emily held Henry close and looked at Thomas, eyes shining with newfound strength. "We may never forget," she said, "but we can choose to forgive. For Lily. For us." Thomas nodded, pulling them both into a gentle embrace. In that moment, forgiveness became their foundation, a fragile but unbreakable bond. Though the scars of the past remained, Henry's family began to move forward with open hearts. The second chance they had been given was not just a miracle, it was a choice. A daily commitment to love, to heal, and to live fully once more. And with each step, they grew stronger. The first warm rays of spring sunlight spilled through the windows, filling the house with a gentle glow that seemed to breathe new life into every corner. The once heavy atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a cautious optimism that blossomed quietly, like the delicate flowers in the garden below. Henry, now toddling confidently, explored the living room with curiosity, his laughter ringing like music. Emily watched from the sofa, a soft smile touching her lips. Thomas sat nearby, reading quietly but stealing glances filled with a new tenderness. The months since Henry's rebirth had been filled with struggle and tears, but also with moments of healing and joy. Together, they had faced the shadows of grief and come through the other side, not unscathed, but stronger and more connected. The home no longer felt like a mausoleum of lost dreams, but a sanctuary where love, though tested, endured. One afternoon, Emily suggested they create new family traditions to honor Lily's memory and celebrate their present. They planted a tree in the garden, its budding branches symbolizing growth and hope. They framed Lily's drawings alongside Henry's, a beautiful tapestry of past and present, and on quiet evenings, they lit candles, one for the daughter they lost, one for the son they had gained. Though young, Henry carried an old soul's wisdom. His innocence and love reminded Emily and Thomas daily of the power of forgiveness and second chances. He was the bridge connecting their fractured past to a hopeful future. As spring deepened, the family embraced the promise of new beginnings. Challenges would come, but together they would face them. Their journey had taught them that healing was not linear, but a winding path filled with light and shadow. And most importantly, that love could survive even the deepest tragedy. The gentle calm that had settled over the family was suddenly broken by the harsh winds of reality. A letter arrived, marked urgent, carrying news that threatened to unravel the fragile peace Henry's family had fought so hard to build. Emily held the envelope with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the words that made her breath hitch. The insurance company was denying a claim, citing technicalities and fine print. The financial strain would deepen. The house might be lost. Thomas paced the room, fists clenched as the walls seemed to close in. The family had barely begun to heal, and now they faced the threat of losing everything. Emily felt tears well, not just for the house, but for the safety and security they had fought to reclaim. Henry, sensing the tension, crawled to her side, reaching up with his small hands. "Mommy," he whispered. The word cut through the fear like a beacon. Despite the looming crisis, the family found strength in unity. Sarah, Emily's sister, returned with renewed determination, helping them navigate legal hurdles and connect with local aid organizations. Neighbors pitched in, offering support and encouragement. In this storm, they discovered the power of community and the resilience born from love. One quiet night, Thomas sat with Emily, the weight of their worries heavy but shared. "We've come so far," he said softly. "No matter what happens, we face it together." Emily nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. For Lily, for Henry, for us. Though the future remained uncertain, the family held tight to their hope. Henry's laughter, bright and pure, was a reminder that even amid storms, light could shine through. They would fight for their home, their family, and the second chance they had been given. Spring's gentle warmth had softened the edges of winter's harsh grip, bringing with it a sense of renewal that touched every corner of the family's life. The garden blossomed with wildflowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the long shadows of grief that once clouded the house. Henry sat on the grass, tiny fingers brushing petals as he laughed with pure joy. Emily and Thomas watched nearby, hands entwined, hearts quietly mending. The family had faced countless trials, grief, financial worries, and fragile trust, but they had come through stronger. Every hardship became a stepping stone toward deeper connection. Emily looked at Thomas, her eyes shining with gratitude. "We're not the same people we were," she said softly. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we're better." Thomas smiled, squeezing her hand. "Better, because we've chosen to keep going." They began planning for the future, not just surviving but living. The house became a home again, filled with laughter, music, and the promise of new memories. Henry, with his quiet wisdom, was their anchor, a living testament to second chances and the resilience of love. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily gathered the family together. They lit a candle for Lily, a symbol of remembrance and hope. "We carry her in our hearts," Emily whispered. "And with that love, we move forward." Thomas nodded, eyes glistening. "Together," Henry smiled, reaching for both their hands. In that moment, the family embraced their second chance, a future filled with light, love, and the unbreakable bond of healing. The seasons shifted once again, carrying with them the subtle promise of change. The garden flourished under Henry's curious gaze, each new bloom a reminder of growth and possibility. The house, once heavy with sorrow, now echoed with footsteps of hope and laughter. Henry's world expanded every day. First words, first steps, first discoveries. With each milestone, Emily and Thomas found new reasons to believe in tomorrow. One crisp morning, Emily received a letter inviting her to join a local community group focused on supporting families who had faced loss. Nervous but hopeful, she shared the news with Thomas. "It's time," she said quietly, "to open doors, not close them." Thomas nodded, a rare smile breaking through. For us, for Henry, for Lily. The family began to step beyond the walls of their house, meeting others who understood their pain, sharing stories, and finding strength in shared experience. Henry watched as his parents connected with new friends, their smiles genuine and warm. The outside world, once daunting, became a source of comfort. With renewed hope, Emily returned to her passion for painting, colors and shapes flowing from her brush like a release of years of held-back emotions. Thomas found solace in woodworking, crafting small pieces of art that adorned their home. Together, they rebuilt not only their family but their individual selves. One evening, as Henry slept peacefully, Emily and Thomas sat on the porch, hands intertwined beneath the stars. "We're planting new roots," Emily whispered. "Stronger, deeper." Thomas kissed her hand, "And with those roots, we'll reach higher than ever before." Spring's gentle rain had soaked the earth, nourishing the garden and washing away the dust of winter. Inside the house, light filtered softly through the curtains, illuminating the worn photograph of Lily on the mantel, a constant reminder of love lost and memories cherished. Henry, now toddling confidently, clutched a small stuffed bear, his eyes wide with innocence and quiet wisdom beyond his years. One afternoon, as Emily folded laundry, Thomas approached with a hesitant smile. The air between them was warm but tinged with the gravity of unspoken truths. "I think it's time," Thomas began softly, "to let go of some of the pain we've been carrying." Emily looked up, eyes meeting his. "It's not forgetting," she said, "but freeing ourselves." They spoke then, of forgiveness, acceptance, and the courage to move forward without guilt dragging at their heels. Together, they decided to hold a small ceremony in the garden. Friends and neighbors gathered, each bringing a flower to honor Lily's memory. One by one, they shared stories, laughter mingling with tears, weaving a tapestry of remembrance and healing. Emily and Thomas released a balloon into the sky, watching it drift higher and higher until it disappeared into the endless blue. It was a symbolic letting go, of grief's tight hold, of what had been, and a step toward embracing what could be. Henry clapped his hands with joy, unaware of the ceremony's full meaning, but sensing the love that surrounded him. He was their light, their hope, the second chance that gave their broken family a new beginning. That night, as stars glittered outside, Emily and Thomas held each other close, hearts lighter and spirits renewed. They knew the road ahead would still have shadows, but they would walk it hand in hand, stronger for having learned the strength to let go. Sunlight streamed warmly through the kitchen window, filling the room with a golden glow that seemed to chase away the last remnants of winter's chill. Henry sat in his high chair, a bright smile illuminating his cherubic face as Emily and Thomas moved around the room, preparing breakfast together with a quiet harmony. The house buzzed softly with life, a sharp contrast to the silence that once defined it. Laughter and chatter now wove through the walls, signaling the arrival of a new chapter. Emily caught Thomas's eye across the room and smiled, a smile filled with gratitude for the journey they had endured and the love that had brought them here. Plans were made for the future, not just dreams, but goals. Emily talked about opening a small art studio where she could teach, pouring her passion into a new purpose. Thomas spoke of starting a woodworking business, crafting pieces that told their story of resilience. Henry, in his innocence, was the heart that tied their dreams together, a living reminder that life goes on and love endures. That afternoon, the family stepped outside into their blooming garden. The tree they had planted for Lily now stood tall, its branches reaching toward the sky, a symbol of growth, remembrance, and hope. They held hands, feeling the strength in their unity. No matter what tomorrow brought, they would face it together. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Emily whispered softly, "We have our second chance. Let's make it count." Thomas nodded, holding her close. Henry giggled, reaching up to touch their faces. In that moment, the past's shadows faded, replaced by the brilliant light of love, healing, and endless possibilities. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it and you would love for more, kindly comment below. Don't Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.